Good evening, everyone. Wherever you are listening from, welcome to episode 5 of our podcast, Not the Perfect Crime. It's Friday, the 3rd of June 2016, in the quiet English countryside. We're in Suffolk, in the east of England, in a tiny village called Weybread. Here, life is slow, the fields are green, and everyone more or less knows everyone else. In a little house on the edge of the village live Peter and Sylvia Stuart. Peter is 75, Sylvia is 6. They're retired, they live alone, and their life is very simple. A bit of gardening, some shopping, evenings at the local dance school to keep their joints moving, and calls with their daughter, Christy. And then, suddenly, silence. Christy is used to speaking with her parents regularly. She lives far away, so the phone is how she checks in. But from Sunday, the 29th of May, around 10 in the morning, her parents stop answering. On Sunday, she calls once. On Monday, she calls again. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, nothing. No answer on the landline, no reply to messages. By Thursday, the 2nd of June, Christy's worry has turned into fear. She calls one of the neighbours in Weybread, a close friend of her father's. She asks him, "Can you please go over to the house and see if Mum and Dad are okay?" The neighbour walks up the lane to the Stuarts' isolated home. It's a house surrounded by fields and trees, a little bit away from the village. He reaches the front door and finds it half open. Inside, the silence is heavy. No radio, no TV, no voices. Just the ticking of a clock. He steps into the kitchen. On the table there are fresh vegetables. On the chopping board, an onion lies half-cut, knife beside it. It looks as if someone was in the middle of making lunch, and simply vanished. In the living room, Sylvia's computer is still on, connected to the internet, open on an online grocery website. Upstairs, the rooms are in order. No signs of a struggle. Nothing broken, nothing turned over. And then, one more detail that chills him. The cat. The Stuart's cat is there, thin and desperate, clearly not fed or given water for days. The car keys are in the house. The car is still outside. Their mobile phones are lying in different rooms. The key to the front door is still in the lock from the inside. It's as if Peter and Sylvia have evaporated into thin air. The neighbour doesn't hesitate. He calls the police. Officers arrive quickly. First, it's treated as a missing persons case. But the more they look, the stranger it gets. No forced entry. No broken glass. No cupboards emptied. Nothing that says robbery. And yet, 2 elderly people have disappeared in the middle of preparing a meal, with their computer on and their cat starving. Police search the house. Everything is exactly where it should be. So they move outside. They comb the garden, the sheds, the trees around the property. About 15 meters from the house, in a water-filled ditch hidden by vegetation, one officer notices something dark floating just below the surface. It's plastic. A sheet of tarpaulin. They pull it towards them. As it comes closer, they see it. A hand, pale and human, sticking out from under the plastic. The body is wrapped clumsily, as if someone was in a hurry. They remove the tarpaulin. It's Peter Stuart, the quiet, elderly man from the village, Sylvia's husband. The body is already in an advanced state of decomposition. The pathologist will later say that Peter died around the 30th of May, just a day after the last time anyone saw the couple alive. He has been stabbed multiple times with a knife or similar weapon. At least 9 wounds in total, 8 of them deep, aimed at his chest and vital organs. Whoever did this wasn't just trying to stop him. They wanted to make sure he died. But where is Sylvia? Police search the entire property, the nearby fields, the surrounding woodland. Nothing. One body, one victim, but a second person, missing. Is Sylvia also dead, her body hidden somewhere else? Has she been kidnapped? Or, in the darkest version, could she be involved? At this stage, everything is possible. Let's pause here and talk about who Peter and Sylvia were. In Weybread and the surrounding area, the Stuarts were well known and well liked. They weren't wealthy celebrities, just a kind, ordinary couple. They had retired, they lived modestly, They danced together twice a week at a local school, more for fun and exercise than performance. They kept to themselves, but everyone who knew them spoke of them with affection. And in a place like Weybread, a violent murder is unthinkable. This is the kind of village where, as people say, if someone accidentally ran over a cat, they'd apologize, call the police, and turn themselves in. So how do you explain a brutal killing like this? When police can't find burglars, strangers, or enemies, they start with the people closest to the victims. Family. Investigators talk to relatives and friends. Most describe Peter and Sylvia as peaceful, loving, and absolutely without enemies. But one name keeps coming up: Steve Baxman. Steve is 61. He lives about 150 kilometers away, in Essex. He's related to the Stuarts by marriage. His father, Sidney, is Sylvia's relative by marriage, and there's long-standing tension between the families. Police go to talk to Steve. He doesn't hide the fact that relations with Peter and Sylvia were cold. Arguments, resentments, money disputes, the usual family drama that can grow heavy over the years. But then Steve says something that changes the direction of the whole investigation. He mentions his father Sidney, who is elderly and in poor health. For years, Sidney had a live-in carer, a health assistant, a man called Qazimaj. According to Steve, this carer liked to boast. He told Sidney stories about his past, about working in the army, about violence, about killing people, not just in war, but he claimed, in civilian life as well. In other words, he presented himself as a professional killer. Steve says his father was terrified of him. Police go to see Sidney himself. Sidney confirms the story. Yes, his carer, Ollie, talked about crimes, about being paid to kill. Yes, he had bragged about at least one murder in Eastern Europe. Yes, he made him deeply uncomfortable. With that, attention shifts. The main suspect is no longer a relative. It's the carer, Ollie. Ollie worked through a care agency based in London. When detectives contact the agency and ask about him, they get another surprise. He hasn't turned up for work for more than a week. He left his flat in a hurry. His things are gone, cupboards open, drawers left pulled out. It looks like he left in a rush, or fled. Colleagues describe him as quiet, but strange. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he liked to mention jobs from his past. Small crimes, a robbery here, some shady business there. Nothing verified, but enough to make people uneasy. In Ollie's office, police seize his computer. On the browser history they find Google searches for the address of Peter and Sylvia Stuart, maps of the Weybread area, and satellite views of their isolated home. So he knew where they lived. He had studied the location. Next, they look at his mobile phone records. Modern phones are wonderful for detectives. They leave a trail. Cell tower data show that, in the days leading up to the murder, Ollie's phone made several trips between London, his own home, and Weybread. 7 times, back and forth. Those trips had nothing to do with his official job. The last visit coincides almost exactly with the time Peter is believed to have been killed. Then there's the money. Checking Peter and Sylvia's bank accounts, police see that on the 30th of May, the day after they vanished, a large sum of cash was withdrawn from Sylvia's account at a cash machine. Shortly after, more withdrawals are made. £300 here, 500 there, until the bank's system flags this as suspicious and blocks the card. This pattern does not fit Sylvia's usual behavior at all. CCTV from the cash machines doesn't show Sylvia. Instead, it shows a man in a cap, trying carefully not to expose his face to the camera. His build, his movements, his clothing, all match Ali. So who is this man, really? Investigators dig into his past. They discover that Ollie Qazimaj is not his real name. He was born in 1973 in Albania, in a region called Elbas. His birth name is Vital Dopi. He grew up in a conservative family. His father was a plumber. At some point he served in the Albanian military. When he was 27, he arrived in the United Kingdom, claiming to be fleeing the war in Kosovo. He applied for asylum, changed his name to Ali Qazimaj, and began a new life. Under this new identity, he worked odd jobs: driver, labourer, then care worker. Back in Albania, he had a wife and child, but in Britain, he moved through life alone, adapting to whatever role he needed. He also had another side: gambling. At racecourses, casinos, betting shops, people knew him by yet another name: Marco Costa. He lost more than he won. Debts piled up. To keep playing, he borrowed money, and he found a generous source: Sydney and his wife Helene, the elderly couple he cared for. They adored him. To them, he was almost like a son. Helene bought him presents, clothes, even a car. Over the years, they lent him the equivalent of tens of thousands of pounds. At the same time, he quietly stole smaller amounts here and there. Little withdrawals, little loans they never agreed to. When Helene died, Ollie stayed on to care for Sydney. He pushed his luck further, talking about his violent past, making sure Sydney understood he was not someone to cross. Sydney, frightened, tried to keep him happy, and he talked. He talked about his family, his in-laws, about Peter and Sylvia Stuart. He mentioned that they were comfortable, that they owned their home, that they were well off. He probably had no idea that these casual comments were planting a very dark seed, because for a gambler drowning in debt, the idea of a quiet, isolated, older couple with money can sound like an opportunity. And if those in-laws and the family don't get along, even better, blame can be shifted. Back to the investigation. Police also find Ali's car, a Citroën abandoned near the English Channel, not far from the ferry routes between Britain and mainland Europe. Inside, forensic teams make several discoveries. On the driver's door, on the outside, there are traces of blood. DNA tests confirm it's Peter Stuart's blood. In the boot, they find hairs that match Sylvia's DNA profile. They also find a plastic bag with Ollie's fingerprints on it. To detectives, the picture is becoming clear. Ollie used this car to transport Sylvia's body. But where? They turn to the ferry records and the Port of Dover's CCTV. On the 4th of June 2016, one day after Peter's body was found, cameras record Ollie driving onto a ferry, heading to France. He has left the country. A Europe-wide alert is issued. His photo and details go out to police forces across the continent. Given his military background and the violent stories he himself told, officers expect a long, complex manhunt. Instead, they're surprised. Just 2 weeks later, he's found not deep in some criminal underworld, but in a refugee center in Luxembourg, living under yet another name, claiming to be an asylum seeker who has never set foot in Britain. A staff member recognizes him from the wanted notice and calls the police. On the 16th of June, 2016, Ali Qazimaj is arrested. The interviews are complicated. He refuses to admit who he really is. To Luxembourg police, he says his name is something else, that he's Albanian, yes, but has never been to England, has never heard of Suffolk, Weybread, or The problem for him is that the British already have his fingerprints, his immigration records, and his British passport application. They have his car agency files, his car, his DNA. They even have a distinctive tattoo on his right arm, an eagle clutching a heart in its claws, a tattoo that matches the description in his UK medical records. There is no doubt, Vital, Doppy Ollie, Qazimaj, Marco Costa, all the same man. He is extradited to England in July. Even in front of British detectives, he keeps up the act. He speaks English fluently, but pretends he learned it quickly from movies and TV. He denies ever working as a carer, denies knowing Sydney, denies everything. Despite this, prosecutors charge him with 2 counts of murder. Peter Stuart, whose body has been found, and Sylvia Stuart, whose body has never been recovered. The trial begins on the 13th of March, 2017. The prosecution is led by a barrister named Karim Khalil. His task is not just to show that Ollie killed Peter, but also to convince the jury that Sylvia is dead, and that Ollie killed her too, even without a body. He lays out the evidence. Peter stabbed repeatedly in his own kitchen, probably while he was preparing a meal. Sylvia forced to give up the PIN for her bank card, her money withdrawn by a man seen on CCTV, a man whose build and clothes match Ollie. Ollie's phone placing him near the Stuarts' home 7 times, including on the night of the murder. His internet searches for their address and maps. The abandoned Citroen with Peter's blood on the door. Sylvia's hair in the boot. Ollie's fingerprints throughout. He shows how Ollie was drowning in gambling debt. How he squeezed money out of Sydney and Helene Baxman. And how, after hearing that Peter and Sylvia were comfortable, he began to plan. Witness after witness comes to the stand. Family, neighbours, Sydney himself. They describe Ollie's charm, his manipulative kindness, and the way their relationship with him slowly turned into fear. Ollie, sitting in the dock, barely reacts. He refuses to give fingerprints voluntarily. He insists he is the victim of some bizarre mistake. Someone else using his identity. The jury doesn't believe him. They deliberate. And they find him guilty of both murders. The judge sentences him to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 35 years before he can even be considered for parole. He will be almost 80 by then. But there is one more element. Under British law, if a murderer refuses to reveal where they left their victim's body, that silence can be taken into account when deciding if they are safe to release. In practice, it means, if you don't say where the body is, you will almost certainly die in prison. Even confronted with that, Ollie will not speak. In court, addressing Sylvia's family, he says, "I'm sorry for what happened to your loved one, but I cannot tell you where her body is, because I didn't kill her." For the Stuarts' relatives, this is like a second sentence. No grave, no place to mourn, just an empty space where Sylvia should be. Ali Qazimaj appeals his conviction. The appeal is rejected. The verdict stands. And so he sits in his cell, carrying with him the secret of what he did with Sylvia Stuart. A secret he seems determined to take to his grave. Thank you for listening to this episode of our podcast. If you'd like more stories like this, don't forget to follow and share it with someone who loves true crime as much as you do. Until next time, stay safe and trust your instincts.